So I would say that in defense of our guest, he totally couldn't help when he was being chased by the army of zombie midgets. I mean, when he first explained that, then I totally got why he wasn't there.
Oh,
And
yeah, I know, but
it
still.
wasn't, and it wasn't fair of me like to rag on him like that. I mean, you came off as very diplomatic, I thought,
I
towards
tried
him.
my
Yeah,
best.
yeah. Yeah, you were being very, very nice to him, all things considered.
Oh, definitely.
At that point,
That is my nature, as you well know. I'm this very good-hearted, very diplomatic kind of person
yeah,
who.
you're a very positive guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So thank you for stroking my ego right there. Now, in all seriousness, I would like to apologize to our guest from our previous disastrous episode
You
that
already
needed a
did
couple of
that.
extra S's on the end.
In all fairness, you already did that. I'm getting the feeling that my connection is screwed because it's like watching a stop motion movie. So so
Oh
this
yeah,
will
because
work out in some
now we've
fashion.
started broadcasting. All of a sudden, the connection's crapping out.
Yeah, it was fine for the last like 5 minutes or so, but yeah.
Dude, you just went full Daft Punk on me.
That's really interesting because
I have
I was
no idea what
practicing.
you just said.
I was practicing one more time just there. So incidentally, you just froze up with both hands in the air. So you're sitting like this right now. I have no idea
Yeah,
whose
and
connection is most sucky.
so you working fine like 10 minutes ago.
The Olsen hood.
Oh shit.
So yeah.
So anyway, let's get to the old the Who Tommy thing. Can you see me?
I can see one finger. Well, that was an interesting exercise.
Hey, we're so fucking good at this shit. Actually,
This is professionalism at work.
that is exactly it. So what actually happened was, and the reason for this odd intro, for those of you listening to the audio version, I actually have no idea if Fred's going to stitch in the disastrous first attempt that we did here.
I
He
think I'm
might.
gonna stitch in what I posted on our Twitter account, which was the intermission organ music from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which seemed fitting.
Because we're kind of in a conundrum here because we started a hangout and we were it worked perfectly for the 10 minutes up until we hit start broadcast when Fred and I were just talking Klingon at each other in our native language, and then we hit start broadcast and then everything just went at us, which is the sound
I
that
started going one more time.
yeah, exactly, it went fucking Daft Punk on us.
Yeah.
And it made the sound that rooters make when they're busy projectile vomiting all over your floor instead of doing what they're actually supposed to do.
I could see smoke behind you, and I could see our intended guest from the last episode walking away with a grin.
He's just poking his head and toasty, and then fucking off again.
Anyway, I believe it is time for a long overdue intro.
I think you're absolutely right. Now, before we do that, I just want to know, since we do adhere to a no censorship, no rule rule, you brought up on IRC channel while we were busy fixing this shit. If I were to stitch in the video part from the first hangout before things fucked up, is that technically editing, or is this for sake of completion and transparency?
Actually, it's about ethics and games journalism.
Fucking knew you were gonna say that, you fucking dick.
Anyway, I suppose what we do is that we pretend it didn't happen officially, in the episode, and then we just leave it on Google Hangouts and YouTube for all to see as
I just made the video private, by the way.
Yeah, but make it public again because it's take one. No one did it. Dave Brubeck Quartet did this piece called Take 5, and that's probably because they didn't manage to do it in take one.
No, it's because it's in 5/4 time. Anyway, fuck it. Roll the intro.
Are you gonna develop the cough as well? You know, or
Not
or
for
that
another 20 years or so.
or that special laugh?
I already have that one.
Oh, awesome! And boom, we're back.
And boom! Oh my God! Oh shit! What just happened? Yeah. So anyway, what we were going on about was that our fabulous previous episode, which I already sort of apologized for, in our fabulous BSD Plays 6-hour marathon of Blackout, the adventure game.
You also apologized for it back in take 1 of this episode, but I guess it sounds somewhat like.
There is that, and also thank you for the twitchy kind of Japanese horror kind of.
I thought even with that I got the gist of the apology, so that's accepted from me.
That was the exact gist, by the way. The thing that he just did with his elbows. That was
I'm
the
still
gist.
gonna be a fucking asshole about it.
Right. So anyway, I just wanted to apologize to my to what would have been our guest, and to all listeners and viewers who had to endure whatever the hell last episode was all about. This episode is not going to be like that.
No,
I hope
not. Because today we have an actual subject which is partially related to sound design. Because if you listen to the clusterfuck that was the last episode, we were basically trying to pick up the pieces of what we were gonna discuss, which was related to sound design, but was more about music, adaptive sound design. And somewhere along the lines, we went into the subject of narration, and we had a little argument about that, but not an argument that covers all the meat that I think is on this subject, because it is a major part of adventure games. Let's be honest. Gary Owens, John Rhys Davis. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So what I reckon, what you reckon, because I've read your invitation for this hangout, would be talking about tonight would be first-person narration versus third-person narration. How do you write good narration?
That's a very, very keen, astute observation. I'm very glad. I'm very proud of myself for thinking of it.
An observation on narration.
An observation on the. Oh, thank you. Oh, cheers, everyone. Cheers.
Yeah. Fred, 3 years old.
To be perfectly frank, I couldn't endure listening to the entirety of last episode for personal embarrassment reasons. So I actually can't recall any of our arguments about narration. So I am coming fresh into this argument for this episode.
I think we should come fresh into it, just because we weren't really, we were not arguing in a fun way. So, but tonight we're gonna do that.
Yes. And tonight is all fun shits and giggles, mostly shits, but also a few giggles. Yes. So yeah. What I had in mind. About 30 minutes ago, when we thought of this episode, we're consummate professionals, by the way, was that I've always had sort of a problem with the LucasArts idea of the protagonist walking around describing out loud. This is a door. I see a pulley off in the distance. Here's a monkey, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it comes off as kind of fourth wall breaking, which can be a good thing for gags, certainly. But we've talked a lot about immersion before, and I think both of us agree that immersion is an integral part of a good adventure game.
Definitely.
So continually breaking the fourth wall is not a very smart move. The Tex Murphy games circumvented this by having a reverb on the narration. It plays out in Tex's thoughts, and that's kind of film noirish. So it blends in very well with the Tex Murphy universe. But LucasArts mostly had the protagonist talk out loud, not think out loud.
Now, see, here's a clear difference and a clear set of things we have to. If we're discussing first-person narration, we should differentiate between the sort of first-person narration where the other NPCs in the world clearly are unaware that the main character is narrating, and I'm thinking Monkey Island and such.
Yeah.
Because, well, for the most part anyway, other NPCs don't really react to Guybrush just saying shit out loud, like this is a door, this is a barrel, this is whatever.
Yeah.
And then there are the sort of fourth wall breaking, the type that you just mentioned, of a main character says something, and then a character who's in the room, an NPC who's in the room, just sort of goes, well, that's not really what that is. This is really just
by definition, I would say that any protagonist who just narrates stuff out loud would be fourth wall breaking, because there is no other reason for you to say this is a door, this is a pier, this is a seagull, this is a what fucking ever.
Yeah.
Other than
who the fuck is he talking to?
Yeah, he's informing the great player wielding the mouse and the keyboard somewhere beyond the great void of the fourth wall. So it only makes sense in that context. So by definition, I would say that every single first-person narrator, aside from Tex Murphy, again, the whole film noir thing, I would say every first-person narrator is inherently fourth wall breaking, but certainly you can talk about different degrees of it, because I agree with you that NPCs reacting to it moves one step beyond that.
Yeah, that goes into definite fourth wall breaking. And then you have sort of the middle ground that you just brought up with the Tex Murphy series, where they kind of circumvent this idea, because you're viewing this first person, you're viewing it through Tex's eyes, and what you're hearing is just the voice in his head. I mean, his own thoughts narrating his voice.
As far as I know, that was a treasured move in the whole film noir genre, which Tex certainly borrows a lot from. That would be to have narration, like, I don't know how I got here. She was bad news to me, plastered all over the movie. And then, as the mystery unfolds, usually...
Not as gravelly, though.
I like the gravelly voice, but usually in hindsight, the protagonist comments on what proceeds in the film. Also kind of fourth wall breaking, but not as bad, because in a way you're told a story. You're just, as opposed to having the story told by a spectator like Gary Owens or John Rhys Davis, the story is being told sort of in retrospect by the person who experienced it.
Yeah, but let's get to that in a second, because first-person narration does take on quite a few kind of different forms. We have the LucasArts style, where you're not, the main character is just describing shit out loud, and then you have the Tex Murphy variant, where you're in his head, you're viewing things from his perspective, so you can kind of sense that, okay, you are in his head, so he's just basically just thinking this stuff. And then you have sort of the middle ground, like the Broken Sword series, where the protagonist is describing the world in past tense, in sort of he's not saying it out loud, but it is the same. He is the narrator of his own story. He's just, revisiting. So everything in Broken Sword is kind of a flashback kind of thing.
And then you also have a game like Beneath a Steel Sky, which, in my opinion, most of the time does a pretty good job of not having the protagonist straight out descript stuff, but you look on the piston in the very beginning of the game, and he'll throw out a joke about how it's wheezing and banging like an asthmatic dinosaur in the mating season. And if you think about it,
line.
Yeah, it's a brilliant line, but it tells us nothing. It tells us nothing about what he's looking at. But
no.
we learn more about him as a character. It's clear to us that he is looking at it, and he has a very skewered perspective on what it is, which is pretty cool.
Which is very cool, and you could say the same for like Day of the Tentacle, where the different personalities will encounter the same object, like the Chronojon, and they will describe it in different ways. Like Bernard is more technical, and Hoagie just goes, "Well, it's a time machine."
Going back to the Steel Sky, I think some narration is more or less belonging to Joey. So the Robert or Foster or Overman, depending on how far you are. Spoiler. 25-year-old spoiler. Will sometimes describe the stuff, but more than often, actually, pretty often, Joey, his robot sidekick, 25-year-old spoiler, will be the one doing the narration. So you can also have that kind of narration. A sidekick. I suppose you could say that second-person narration. It's a bit of a stretch, but it exists. It's out there.
Well, Beneath the Steel Sky is interesting in the sense that apparently only Joey can hear him describe shit out loud, and it's kind of a conversation he carries on with his sidekick. Once you get him up and running, again, spoiler. But
Can I
you know,
just
other
can I get a
characters
quick
won't
message in?
focus on it.
Can I get a
Sorry?
quick message in, because this is
Oh.
for Amirad Alkago over in the RC channel, who remarked that he does not know I'm Batman, and I've got a question. I've got a question for Mr. Alkago. Tell me something. Do you bleed? You're going to.
Oh, God.
So yeah, that was that out of the way. I am in no way, shape, or form Batman. That distinct honor belongs to Ben Affleck.
Right. So for anyone not watching this for some reason, I just tweeted the YouTube URL, the new YouTube URL for this episode, so you guys can all catch up on that. You can also join us on our IRC channel and ask us questions if so you desire. So yeah, I think we've first person. The thing I just want to get back to, from a literary theory standpoint, of course, being one of those well-educated types who has a degree in the shit, I just want to harp on that for a second. My big question is, protagonists were walking around describing the world around them in the first person, just looking at it going, that's a closet door, that's another door, that's a barrel and such. Who are they talking to? The voice in their head? The player? Are they communicating this to other NPCs? And if so, aren't they just being, schizophrenic little bastards who are just, mad people who just wandered into a tavern or a place where other people, like a shop or something, and just started saying, that's an apple, that's an orange, that's a watermelon.
Yeah, and the guy behind the counter just goes, no shit, Sherlock. I fucking put it there. I know that's a fucking apple.
Exactly. Like, who the fuck is this person talking to?
I would say again that this is why I consider first-person narration vocally, oral first-person narration to be inherently fourth wall breaking, because it is unrealistic. If you walked around and said to yourself, "This is an apple. This is the counter. This is the guy behind the counter. I like his tie," you would probably be apprehended and dragged off and shot in some back alley, depending on what country you're in at the time.
Yeah, but then conversely, of course, we have a third-person narration, which was a staple of the old Sierra games. And I'm not really sure what the consensus is among diehard adventure fans. I suppose we can count ourselves in the diehard adventure game scheme, but definitely. I got the sense, and this is just my personal sense of where the adventure game community is at. But
oh my god, you see dead people too?
Yeah. I'm looking at one right now. I always got the sense.
That's not very nice.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I love you. I just always got the sense that people were sort of put off by the idea of having a third person. Like that was sort of an archaic way of presenting a game, because this goes back to text adventures. You have the you the player and the computer game are actually the ones communicating, and the people inside the game are just little avatars running around in their own little world, and you have no direct connection to the protagonist, him or herself.
That is true.
So for most, and this is again just a sense that I have, please correct me if I'm wrong, and so do any of our listeners and or viewers. Is this sort of an archaic throwback to standard literature? There was a narrator, and then this guy said that, and he said that, and he responded to that, and does that kind of create a disconnect?
I think you could argue it's a throwback to literature, but it's not a direct throwback. It's a throwback via the text adventure. I mean, the first graphical adventures obviously didn't provide you with a tactile interface. It provided you with a parser, so it wasn't that far off. It was kind of a transition. So yeah, I would argue it's a throwback to classic literature that goes, he thought, she thought, they talked. But not directly, just via the text adventure, which was the immediate predecessor of the first type of adventures to have that kind of narration along with a visual avatar.
Right, because one thing I always thought was very interesting about Leisure Suit Larry games, just to bring up an example, especially 2 and 3, which were sort of on the cusp between full-blown point and click and still parser-driven. You know, it used the
they
SI,
were very close. You had a mouse cursor in at least.
which did jack shit.
I don't think you did. You probably didn't too, but the only thing you could do with it was move. There was no cursor control other than that.
And he wouldn't like circumnavigate the obstacles in a way. He'd just stop dead in his tracks like he was in a fucking Monty Python sketch.
I am walking into a lighting post.
Anyway, what I thought
sexually gratified.
Can I fuck it? No. Oh shit! I'm in a Leisure Suit Larry game. Fuck. No, what I thought was interesting was that back in at least Leisure Suit Larry 3 and maybe even 2, they had sort of not you know, NPC portraits like you get in Wedget Eye games and such, but they had maybe they did even, but you saw, you know, lips move and such, and you know, characters were actively speaking. I mean, they had speaking sprites in the game that they would actually speak.
In Leisure Suit Larry 3, you actually had close-ups of characters talking. You did for the girls that you attempt to pick up, at least. I can't recall if you do for any other characters. I don't think you do. In Leisure Suit Larry 2, you did have speaking animations during a number of cutscenes, I think. You also had speaking cutscenes in general. But then again, you also did way back to like I actually think King's Quest 1 had speaking animations too, but they weren't. You know, there was no attempt at lip syncing. There was no attempt to depict that they were saying this sentence out loud.
Oh,
they
sure,
were just that's yammering.
That wasn't really what I was getting at either. But thank you for clearing that up. What I was getting at was that Allo, in particular, with the Leisure Suit Larry games, was quite inconsistent with trying to differentiate between, let's say we divide up narration box or game text boxes into description and dialogue. And he would sort of mess things up. He would he would write out dialogue with quotation marks, and then sort of a inflection put in by the narrator. She said something in a sultry voice, and then she gestures and something, and this would carry on long into the series, like up to like the 6th game or something.
Well, that is very fascinating, because Al is kind of like the odd man out. I get a distinct feeling you can't pick him into a particular category. You know, he did one of the only, if not the only, game that successfully marries the parser with the point and click interface.
Oh yeah, at least this is Layer 7. Oh,
yeah,
cool.
This is something that no one thought possible, but he just went in and did very, very well there. You know, and I think that's fucking brilliant. You know, he did what no one else thought possible, because let's face it, the adventure game crowd can be very conservative at times, and it's normally either or. You know, either you prefer King's Quest 5 or you prefer King's Quest 1. It's one or the other. So I love the fact that Allo blended these two unblendable things, and he made it fucking work.
There are you will get no counter argument from me on that note, sir.
But I do think he probably did the same for narration. You know, he was breaking boundaries. He was breaking storytelling boundaries. In some games that some people think are crude and lewd because of the humor, but actually the Leisure Suit Larry games show absolutely fantastic progression.
But what I was getting at, and you're absolutely right, of course. But what I was getting at was, if you were to add a voice pack to Leisure Suit Larry 2 or 3 and such, where you have this sort of someone says such and such. Oh, now I remember. They didn't have like speaking portraits, but they had this text box that showed up with the person speaking.
They did
kind of had this bar over the top of the
black
box.
Bar with white text. Yeah.
Yeah, but the dialogue would still be interrupted like it would in a novel. as it's in quotation marks. Here's the real dialogue, then comma, then the inflection, and she said it in this and this and such way, and she gestures and such. If you were to add a speech pack to that, I mean, how would you go about that? You can't record someone's voice saying something, then interrupt it with the narrator's voice, and then go back to the character's voice. It's that is most definitely the most let's say a clear cut or whatever kind of throwback to standard type of narrative, like
standard type of literary narrative,
literary narrative, exactly. Whereas with most adventure games, you have this clear cut distinction between the narrator says this, and then the protagonist says that, and then the NPC says that. These are clearly cut up different lines.
I could actually see that work. A personal funny anecdote is that when I went to elementary school, we would often have stories read out aloud, and I remember being annoyed that we had two teachers at this point doing this, and they would switch so that they didn't start having dry mouths because of reading 50 fucking pages in a row. So they would switch. And I recall as a kid, I was being distinctly annoyed that they made no attempt to try to act it out. You could have because interestingly enough, this was a male teacher and a female teacher, and I remember thinking you could have had the guy read out the male part, and then you could switch to the woman for the female parts and have them, I suppose, interchange on the narration depending on who spoke last. I recall at that point thinking that would totally work, and I kind of still think it would. I don't think it would ruin anything. In many ways, adventure games are interactive literature. So to treat it as such, even with making something out of the limitations inherent to that medium, I don't necessarily think is wrong.
Oh, definitely not. No, I completely agree. I mean, if you were to go by by that example, I mean, have you ever listened to an audiobook of a novel and such where the person reading it out loud is putting on a voice for the dialogue, and then he or she sort of had to put on the narrator's voice for the narration, and then go back into dialogue.
I sadly haven't, but I have heard clips of, and this is fucking great, you need to look it up on YouTube. I have heard clips of an audiobook of The Exorcist read by Sir Christopher Lee, who is playing the possessed girl. So you got Sir Christopher Lee with his distinct British regal inflection talking about, he's reading out shit like,
fuck your mother!
Yeah, that is brilliant. A crucifix was also inserted in the vagina. And then the next minute, he's acting out a character. She fucking tried to murder me, the fucking cunt. It is brilliant. That's an audiobook I need to buy.
If you ever do yourself the disservice of never reading the Red Dwarf novels, please do me the favor of just picking up the audiobook of it, because they are read by the actor who plays Rimmer on the on the television series, and he's actually an impressionist. So he basically puts on the voice of each of the Red Dwarf characters
as
he's reading out the novel. And that novel in particular, I don't know. This also goes back to kind of a literary theory thing. But when you're writing out dialogue, some authors will just put in like quotation marks and then just the entire fucking line, and then at the end just go "he said" or "Rimmer said" and something. And other authors like Douglas Adams or like the Grant Naylor boys who did the Red Dwarf TV series and then the books, they will interrupt dialogue by putting in sort of an inflection, like he said sarcastically, and then continued. which is exactly what Al Lowe did with the Leisure Suit Larry games. He would put in those little inflection commentaries during actual dialogue lines. So doing a voice pack for like Leisure Suit Larry 2 and 3 would be like you basically need just one dude or girl, depending on how weird you wanted the voice pack to be, to read out everything and act out everything.
Sir Christopher for Leisure Suit Larry 2.
Oh shit, man! Leisure Suit Larry 2, like, and then he ate the spinach dip, and it made him very sick.
The end. You just programmed a full operating system, Ken says. How very proud you must be. And this is just brilliant, because Sir Christopher is one of those guys who likes to digress and talk about himself, so we'll just go on and on. This reminds me of the time I met one American gentleman who introduced himself to me as Bill Gates.
Oh, and another person I would dearly love to just listen to narrate an entire adventure game on his own, Sir Patrick Stewart. I mean,
that would be brilliant. That would be brilliant in a totally different way. I mean, Sir Christopher Lee, God bless him, would be completely ridiculous, but Patrick Stewart has a fantastic voice. And
I mean, I would listen to that dude read the fucking phone book.
I can think of one guy to one-up you, one guy who sadly left us not long ago, but Leonard Nimoy did some brilliant narration for Civilization 4, and he could have done some brilliant adventure game narration as well, I'm sure.
But we should, but we should interject that this is not necessarily relevant to the narrator discussion, but both Patrick Stewart and Leonard Nimoy have lent their voice to adventure games.
They have several times, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously not just Star Trek games, although I'm not sure Leonard Nimoy did anything other than Star Trek 25th anniversary and Judgment Rights.
I don't think he did.
But Patrick Stewart did, of course, Star Trek The Next Generation games, but he also did Lands of Lore, which is, well, not an adventure game per se, but he was in that. And that was the only reason I played that fucking game, because I just wanted to listen to the king talk, and he was in the, first 30 minutes of the game, and then he just sent you off into the fucking forest, and that was it. So that's when I gave up on the game. Okay, Patrick Stewart's not in it. Fuck it, I'm on.
We got comments over in the RC channel that I think are fairly interesting. Gareth joined us and wrote that I don't know exactly when he wrote this, but he wrote that doesn't some of this depend on the technology available? You don't have narration on tone when you have voice acting, same as you don't have words on movie screens once the talkies came along. So yeah, that's
an interesting point. Can I just save that for a brief second? Because Amir Akako just corrected us. Leonard Nimoy did provide his voice for a non-Star Trek game, and that was Civilization 4, which is not an adventure game. So I'm just gonna.
I said he did some great narration for Civilization 4. That was the first fucking thing I said. Did you?
I wasn't listening.
Yeah.
You. No, I may love you, but I never listened to you.
I challenge you, all listeners who are listening to this after the fact, rewind and you will hear me say Leonard Nimoy did great narration for Civilization.
No, I am doing other things while we're talking. I mean, I'm picking my balls. I'm rearranging my feet. I'm not always listening to you.
Oh.
So anyway, Gareth's question is actually a very, very good one. Because when we're talking about narration in this sort of highbrow, kind of academic, bullshitty, kind of wanky thing, we are, of course, talking about how difficult would it be to translate this into a voice pack.
Yeah, we're spoiled because we can't stop bringing the auditory dimension into things.
That's exactly it, and of course, I would dearly love to see a game that just flat out shit all over the idea of this is now a dialogue screen and this is now a narration screen, and just basically had the whole thing be narrated like a novel, and then just have like one person just narrate the entire fucking thing as if it was like an audiobook.
That would be interesting.
Why has no one done that? Sorry? Oh yeah.
I'm doing Batman again. You could have the goddamn Batman as an adventure game. I touched my mother's breast. It bled on me.
That's an interesting character development. I think
That
you should
is
keep
that
that to
is that
yourself.
is genuinely Frank Miller. That is an actual line from All-Star Batman and Robin. The one where Batman introduces himself as the goddamn Batman. This is genuine. This is what Frank Miller has come to. And I mean, we've ragged on Adam Baldwin. Let's be fair. Adam Baldwin needs fucking
Deservedly so.
ethics. Frank Miller needs more fucking ethics than we would ever be able to lump on poor Adam. I mean, Adam would be dead if we ever tried to lump the amount of ethics on him that we should lump on poor insane Frank Miller.
Frank Miller can go suck my nuts, but for entirely different reasons. Most of those can be described.
My mother's nuts. They bled on me.
Frank Miller has completely lost the plot, and you know, I'm starting to think Sin City was just like a fluke, like him just on a really calm day. Maybe he dropped Quaaludes or something.
Too, because everything
300 can go bite my fucking nuts. What
everything
a shit.
he does is shit. Everything he makes is shit these days. I mean, The Dark Knight Returns and Sin City, the early issues, those are like happy coincidences, and also the first Sin City movie. The rest is just such a steaming pile of shit. Everything he makes is shit.
Yeah, and he's like unfairly, hailed as this sort of comic book genius when basically all he does is just like wring his hands and just goes, "I would like to see dudes with no shirts on." Yeah, cool, dude.
And people are like, "Oh, this is a graphic novel by Frank Miller," and all you're reading is boobs.
In that gravelly voice, exactly.
Yeah,
so what I would dearly like is an adventure game where Frank Miller is playing himself getting raped in the ass with a pineapple.
I would love to play that game, narrated by Sir Christopher Lee.
Oh yes, and then he inserted the pineapple.
This must be exquisitely painful. Keep it going, lads. He's not quite done yet.
Try the pip first. I hear it's smoother.
Thrust long and prosper. Anyway, that was Digression Junior High. We were talking about an idea of yours that actually got a positive reception over on the over on the RC channel, where Gareth has just pointed out that boobs is now his ringtone. But anyway.
No, but more astutely, he also pointed out that it was actually a good idea to not treat
like a novel, not as a drama, because that it was. I suppose you could say that if you go way back to the early literary concepts, adventure games hail back to theater, and going way back to like the Greek tragedy, where you also actually had an offstage narrator and a chorus talking about what happened. It all hails back to that tradition. But you could do an adventure game that was a novel. I guess the only thing to come close would be stuff like you talked about with Leisure Suit Larry 2, and certainly also some of the text adventures. I mean, it was probably easier for developers and designers to do dialogue when you had the visual aspect of actually having two characters talking to one another.
Well, that's an interesting point, actually, because modern day adventure games operate on the drama level, like Gareth just said on the RC channel. They operate as if the narrator is a completely separate person, and like Greek drama, like you said, there's an off-screen narrator describing shit, and then he carries out what they're gonna do. But then
here is your mother. Should you not at least wear a contraception?
No, because this is the 14th or 15th century, and those are made of sheepskin and very, very uncomfortable.
Oedipus Rex acted out by Kermit the Frog in all roles.
I will do Hamlet in this very weird voice. No, but actually, in the early text adventures and early Sierra Parser games and whatever came after that, before we move into the point and click era, those are actually more, like Gareth says, those are more like novel, like literature, where the line between the narrator and the dialogue spoken is kind of distinct. You could even have a very unreliable narrator telling you that this person so and such actually said this when he actually meant that.
You have that in many
great
games.
example.
You have, but you also have that into the point and click games. So I suspect it's more a case of the humor. But certainly you have that kind of narration in space. The early Space Quest games. Go ahead. I'm sure it's perfectly safe. And then you try to pick up the medal in Space Quest 3, and the narrator goes on to berate you. Oh my, if you had
right, yeah. Well, that's not really what I meant by unreliable narrator. Although that's certainly in the realm of it, but it's kind of a very, very light, because you can actually see what's on the screen. What I'm talking about is like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text adventure, where you walk into the engine room of the Heart of Gold, and the parser, or the computer, or whatever, the narrator in this case, refuses to describe the room to you unless you prod it like 4 or 5 times, just going, look at the room. No, really, you don't want to mess with this. No, look at the room. All right, it's got this and this and this, but that's all there is. No, look at the room. All right, it's got this dangerous thing that you definitely don't want to mess with. And of course, you're supposed to mess with it.
Yeah, of course. Don't mess with it, as Gary Owens would say.
Yay! Doing now here's an idea just out of left field. Unreliable narration in a graphical point and click adventure game. You would definitely need to sort of change up the graphics to where the game is telling you there's this and this. But actually, it's more like this, and then sort of the screen fills out or whatever. The only thing I can think of in that regard is like Sanitarium, and it didn't run with that concept like really at all.
Sanitarium was an interesting game, but also, as far as I remember, not that fun to play. It's a game I need to repurchase because it's been ages since I played it, and I remember liking it certainly, but it also had its bad moments.
Oh yeah, it had a lot. It had a lot of bad moments, and all of those had to do with action trigger finger kind of stuff. I never beat it. I tried to. The whole isometric perspective kind of threw me off a bit, but it did have a couple of things where I wouldn't call it unreliable narration as such, because as far as I can remember, the protagonist was narrating his own world, but he was an unreliable narrator in and of himself.
I didn't play it with voices, but as far as I remember, he was, yeah.
Yeah, because eventually,
But it was also his world. That was appropriate because it was his delusion. It was his psychosis. So it was kind of inappropriate to have someone from the outside narrating it, because that to me would denote that what he's going through is real, but what he's going through is in his head. So it makes sense to have him talking about it.
Oh, definitely. Perfect thing to bring up, because what Sanitarium did was instead of him bullshitting you into thinking that something was something else than what it really was, it would unlock certain parts of, because it was like in an isometric perspective, it kind of looked like Little Big Adventure in some ways, yeah, and it would sort of unlock different parts of the level that you were navigating around in. Because this was
it was kind of Freudian. You had all these fantasies, and the impression I got was that you were moving deeper and deeper and deeper into the unconscious. Actually, it's kind of like Blackout on the level that what you were trying to solve, what the mystery of who you were and what got you here. So. Yeah.
And I never got to the bottom of that mystery. I should probably pick that game up, because I really want to know what the hell this is. I got stuck at the carnival level, and I thought it was so weird that game was split into levels. Like, this is really like it's not like Goblins levels. It's like really like you traverse. You solve one level and then you move on to the next.
It had elements from the action genre, but in all fairness, it's probably the only so-called action adventure I've seen that puts emphasis on adventure rather than action.
Right.
So it has that
Absolutely.
going for it. You know, it's as if the developers just read action adventure and they completely misread it. You know, compared to how other people did.
Like they actually focused on the adventure bit. I mean, shit.
Yeah.
I mean, the only other comparison I can think of is Harvester, which had an action element that was completely. What's the English phrase for the Danish phrase? At lukke op og skide i?
Ah, Jesus, I have no idea. I don't think there's an equivalent.
Anyway, that's exactly what Harvester is.
Lovely mental image of rushing towards the commode and opening it and just sitting down and taking a ginormous dump. I mean, think of Frank Miller sitting down just going, oh, and then you just got shit spewing out.
Yeah,
that was what that phrase in Danish covers. That is what you would do with that.
Which is weird because I always thought that the Danish phrase covered if you wanted to sort of open up something biological, like say a corpse or a hole in the ground or something, and take a gigantic dump in that. Anyway, digressing, Junior High. Yeah. That was a little language intro for you.
But remember, we were the happiest people of the world for a while.
Oh, of course.
Opening up shit and taking dumps on it.
That's why we would think of such a phrase. Yeah. But anyway, what the dudes at Sanitarium did, just to sort of bring this back onto the topic.
Garrett is suggesting that the English phrase would be the turtle is poking his head out.
No,
I think that is more of a tycoing case.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, just to sort of bring this back on to point, what the dudes of Sanitarium did inadvertently, I guess, was to sort of bring in the concept of the unreliable narrator, because we're used to in the olden Sierra games, at least the games that had third-person narration, we're used to the narrator being this sort of omniscient character. He's sort of he or she, sorry, but they're mostly he because we're all dicks.
Now, why would that be?
You had to bring up the one female narrator who's a complete pain in the ass.
Vagina keepers.
Vagina keepers?
Vagina keepers, actually.
Ethics, man, ethics. No, all the old Sierra narrators were kind of these omniscient characters who, kind of knew the story ahead of time, and they just went, "Oh, you weren't supposed to do that." No.
Gary Owens knew you were an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Gary Owens. I have to bring up Space Quest now because you sort of brought me on that. Gary Owens is the perfect example because there's a clear disparity between Space Quests 2 and 4. No, fuck. 4 and 6. I'm doing so good. I'm the best historian ever.
You can tell you're a fan.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, the two games that Gary Owens did the narration voice for, 4 and 6. Yeah. 4 and 6. Is anyone paying attention? 4 and 6.
4 and 6.
Yeah, right. There's a clear disparity between those two because, as I've mentioned ad nauseum on the SpaceQuest.net forums, the reason that I dislike Space Quest 6's narration as opposed to Space Quest 4's is that in Space Quest 6, the narrator does not appear to be omniscient, and also Roger appears to be able to hear him.
Yeah.
So Roger's actually carrying on a conversation with the narrator, which kind of suggests that the narrator is actually a voice inside his head, whereas in Space Quest 4 he's just this sort of he's this connecting tissue between the player and the main character. The main character is not aware that there's a narrator.
Space Quest 4 is also ambiguous because one of the first things he tells you is that you have barely an electron stirred in that well-armored orb on top of your shoulders, and you can't actually tell whether he's talking about Roger Wilco or you, the player. He's just saying you. Whereas, as you know, in Space Quest 6, there are, I'm pretty sure, times where he's going, "No, listen here, Roger," and he's referring
he's
to
directly at Roger. Yeah. There's the scene in the brig when Roger's imprisoned in the brig and he has to build this fucking vegetable mannequin of himself and such. And every time he can buy an object, the narrator just bewilderingly goes, "That's interesting. What are you up to, Roger?"
There's also a scene fairly early on where Roger is talking to Stellar about how he's not sure how B would handle this, and the narrator just out of left field, his reaction hasn't been called for. He just goes, "I believe the reaction whatever. I believe the reason is fear." No,
yeah, exactly.
He is commenting on relationships that Roger, the player character, has, but not on relationship that you, the player, have. I mean, for all intents and purposes, even if you've played Space Quest up until this point, you have no idea who Stellar Santiago is. The narrator knows, and he knows that Stellar Santiago might be bad news in this relationship between Roger and B, which is the only relationship between Roger and any woman that the player at this point knows of.
And also, you bring up an interesting point, one that I hadn't even considered up to this point, is that Roger in Space Quest 6 not only has a speaking voice, but he also thinks. I mean, he has this, the Tex Murphy kind of reverb on the.
Jeez, this is snug, real.
Yeah.
This reminds me of the time I used to wear my mother's. Never mind.
No, but in the scene that you mentioned in the transporter room where he meets Stellar, he's talking to Stellar and he's going, Stellar's going, maybe we should go out for drinks sometimes, and he gets go, nah, let's not do that, because then he thinks, and also Beatrice would wear my sphincter for a necklace.
Which is a great fucking line.
Which is a great line, I'll grant it that, but that basically means that the game has two narrators. Now we have the first-person narrator, the actual main character in the time, not a flashback, in the time that he's in currently.
We should have named our Josh Mandel homage episode after that. Wearing Josh Mandel's sphincter as a necklace.
In retrospect, that would have been a really good one.
Gareth said something over on the RC channel that the stuff we bring out about Gary Owen's nature in Space Quest 4 as the narrator is, I guess, partially because Space Quest 4 Roger is completely devoid of character. I disagree. He has a distinct backstory. We know that he's been in Space Quest 10 at some point prior, because the characters of Space Quest 10, the latex babes of Estros, makes reference to this.
That was latex, dude. Yeah. Like in Danish, latex.
Latex.
No, latex is the programming language that only academics use.
Babes of Estros.
The latex babe of Estros.
I was Tolkien's cousin. Anyway,
insert the pineapple between the... No.
Anyway, there is stuff about Space Quest 4, Roger, that we don't know about. He has a definite backstory, so I disagree. But for the most part, what Gareth says is true. But I don't think they set out deliberately to make him this cardboard character, because they did put in stuff about him actually having lived a life, but ironically it's a life that we don't know about. He had a son. He courted this babe wearing latex.
Yeah, that's true. I think what he was getting at is that Roger didn't actually really have a voice, and the only reason he had a voice actor was because for some reason, occasionally Roger would pipe up and he would, sort of go, "Why are you doing this?" Or "What am I doing strapped to this chair?" And "Is that my son?" And, he would have like bits and pieces, but mostly all of his communication was done by the narrator. I mean, look at when he goes back to Space Quest 1, jumps into the time pod, goes back to Space Quest 1, goes into the rocket bar, and the monochrome boys just go, "Fuck you, 256 colors. Yeah, look at this fancy boy here," and they just throw him. He doesn't say a fucking word. That's not a dialogue.
I'm going to throw the word latex into this podcast from now on as many times as humanly possible, or inhumanly possible, as it were.
Yeah, it seems to be a pretty popular word over in the RC channel.
Yeah, latex. Latex.
Skinny latex to go, please.
Latex is the new block.
Oh dear God! So, not to turn this into an episode of Space Quest Historian, but what other? Yeah, okay. So not to turn this into an episode of Space vs. Dorn, but other examples
You're losing it,
you
Sam.
know, narrators in computer games that are either omniscient or not like in the time frame of the actual main character. Broken Sword aside, because that's technically first person narration in past
I've
tense,
never
so he's
actually
omniscient.
played it. I have heard bits and pieces, but isn't Quest for Glory 4 the one that has John Rhys Davis? Maybe
That's the
people
one.
on the RSC channel can illuminate this, because the examples I have heard from this game have been remarkably close to what Gary was doing. I mean, and John Rhys Davis certainly has a great narration voice. There's this great clip on what the hell is it, YouTube, where he's narrating the main character is coming face to face with the Risulka, which is kind of like this mermaid in a forest lake, and John Rhys Davis, John Rhys Davis is doing this great little skit. Yes, you rub the noses, rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and it's John Rhys Davis. It's fucking brilliant. It cracked me up. That was very Gary Owens-like, you know, and essentially, you know, not remembering ad verbatim what he's saying is, it comes off as, you just stood here facing a mermaid being a fucking idiot. That is very Gary Owens-like to me.
Yeah.
So that would be a game. I'm at a disadvantage, but Quest for Glory 4, as far as I know, certainly.
Oh yeah, definitely, and it was the only Quest for Glory of the old school adventure types that had voices on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, trying to look, I'm trying to look past the Sierra games, because in my recollection, most of the games that had third person narration, be it omniscient or be it just in the zone kind of concurrent narrators, they're all Sierra games for some reason. I can't
Sierra or Sierra fan games, yeah.
I can't think of, because most adventure games these days will jump for the first person narration, will jump for the fourth wall breaking that I can sense. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I can sense that you're on the same page as me with regards to how unimmersive this is. This actually kind of breaks my immersion into the game, to have the character just walk up and go, that's a pineapple, that's a counter.
The first person narration, certainly.
I'll just let you reboot for a second.
Yeah, the first person narration certainly is fourth wall breaking, yeah.
So why do people insist on having a first person narration? Is this because they feel that it's sort of, it connects you to the main character?
I guess they do, which is ironic, because I would argue that it does the exact opposite, but it's also easier. Yeah. I mean, you don't need to hire someone who can one up Gary Owens or John Rhys Davis, which in all fairness is pretty fucking impossible.
Yeah, and God rest his fucking soul, man.
Yeah.
But I'm okay. So we are on the same page. I would really stress to adventure game developers, please stop doing this, because I mean, fair enough, it's fun for the first, but the only reason
we've got an angle over here. Sorry to interrupt you, but no, I'm actually not sorry.
Oh, cool.
We've got an angle over the
of course you're not.
Channel, which is Gareth pointing out that a problem with art right now is that everything is meta. And I guess that kind of bleeds into the adventure game genre. There is a meta dimension to everything. Art these days is very aware of itself. It pisses Gareth off. I wouldn't go as far as saying it pisses me off, but I can certainly see an issue, because occasionally it's refreshing with art that is art for art's sake.
No, but see, the problem is not that games with first-person narratives are necessarily aware of themselves. There are these instances where the first-person narrator is very aware that he or she is in an adventure game. Hi, Simon the Sorcerer, for instance.
Yeah.
Or the Discworld games, where every time every time Rincewind says something, 17 different NPCs in the same fucking room will pipe in and then say something.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean. The entire trope of the first-person narration that is kind of sort of every NPC is oblivious to. That trope is what I can sense that you and I are on the same page on. This is very fourth wall breaking, and it's kind of unnecessary.
Yeah.
So why do adventure game designers insist on doing this?
It's fourth wall breaking on the same level that having a game where the character can only like spew out one line when looking at or interacting with something. I mean, it's fourth wall breaking in the same sense that you can go, "Oh, didn't catch that," and he will say exactly the same thing as if his thought process is completely unchanged.
Well,
so
there's always going to be this sort of sense of no. Sorry, I just got to interject. There's always going to be this sort of sense of disconnect of reality, because you are going to need to ask NPCs the same sort of fucking questions. You are going to need to retread steps and such. You are going to in Indiana Jones. You have to go from one continent to the other and then go fucking back to the other continent just to pick up
to get a bottle of wine and hit on the go. You later threaten with a knife.
What's that idiotic game called? I'm sorry, Miss Jensen.
Indiana Jones and the Mobius Conundrum. Why is this game so weird?
Oh shit, man! I really wanted to give that game a chance. I just didn't. Sorry, dude. I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
I actually liked parts of Mobius. It was easier to like when the main character wasn't like, "That's very interesting. I'm an antiquarian." Here we have the hunchback of fucking Notre Dame running an antique store. No,
what were you saying before I so rudely interrupted you?
I don't remember.
All right, so I've got one. Because I'm just waiting for your threats to reconnect and shit.
Yeah.
No, I've got one. My favorite type of narration would actually be the thing you brought up right off the bat of this episode is the Tex Murphy kind of narration, and not necessarily because the first thing people are going to think is that how can you have a Tex Murphy type of narration without the first person view, and Broken Sword did it. Granted, Broken Sword was in past tense, so that kind of renders the entire game as a flashback, which means that if you die, that's sort of a you can still have.
I got rammed by the goat. I got rammed by the goat again. I got rammed by the goat for a third time before I'd worked that out.
But that still beats your example from. But before we started the failed broadcast, you brought up the dig, and you brought up Robert Patrick's infamous. It doesn't do anything.
It won't do anything. It won't accomplish anything. It won't accomplish anything. Put a beat to it, and it'll sell like hotcakes.
Yeah, it won't do anything. So
it won't accomplish anything. It won't accomplish anything.
Yeah, where's a fucking guitar, man? I left mine. But anyway, that's my favorite because then you're not sort of the whole suspension of disbelief. You have plenty of that to go around in adventure games already.
Yeah, you have plenty of that to go around in games. I mean, for all intents and purposes, stepping completely back. I mean, Oculus Rift looks to be a game changer if done right, but you will never, until VR is done, probably get rid of the aspect that this is you looking at a screen.
All right, but to counter our, because we're sort of reaching an agreement, so we have to throw in a left field thing, which even over on the RC channel.
Your connection is losing it, so we might wind up not having the final discussion. You're losing it, Sam.
God, no. We have too many viewers. Oh God, stop watching us, you cocks.
You shall, and always will be my friend.
Oh God. Okay. I was just quickly gonna say, Kevin said that having a first-person narrator provides more chance for the player character to have a voice, which means designers can make them more specific and have greater character development. That I guess. Fuck it.
Boom!
Are you still there?
I'm still here. I think we're still broadcasting, but it's just you were breaking up badly, and your resolution is about that of blackout. So
Oh God, no.
I'm
Oh
not
fuck.
sure we
Yeah.
can go anywhere. But I don't know. To not reach a consensus, I will say quickly that the style of narration that you bring up is certainly viable, but maybe because of my sense of humor, I prefer the Gary Owens, John Rhys Davis style.
Kind of disconnected kind of narrator.
Yeah,
kind
but
of
that is
not
also
part of-
that is, I will concede that that is also firmly bound to comedic adventures. You know, it works best in those cases, especially if you have a voice that is well suited for it. I mean, certainly John Rhys Davis is fucking funny. Gary Owens was the king of fucking funny. I would love to hear Brian Blessed do adventure game narration.
You totally broke up there, dude.
I just said I would love to hear Brian Blessed do adventure game narration. Also, I'm not the one breaking
good.
up. You are.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but I'm the one streaming. So hey,
Yeah.
maybe we should just get into the spiel while we still can, and then just because
Yeah.
we're coming up on an hour anyway. So
Shall I get into the spiel because your connection is shitty? If you liked what you saw, and bear in mind this is take 2, fuck take 1. If you liked what you saw in take 1, you're a fucking idiot. If you like what you saw here in take 2,
you're also a fucking idiot. No, wait, we love you. We desperately love you.
You're well qualified for idiocy. You are good at being an idiot, and there is more idiocy for you at backseatdesigners.com. Over on backseatdesigners.com, we also have a window to a place where, if you've listened closely, you'll figure out we've gathered a lot of input from people joining us in there. We have an RC channel.
I thought you were going to say other idiots.
Yeah, other idiots. Yeah. The idiots we keep close to our hearts are hanging out over on the RC channel, which you can also easily access via backseatdesigners.com. There is both a web client hanging around in there and a guide to how you connect to it with other clients. We're also on Twitter at BSDesigners. That's backseat, not bullshit. We've also got a Facebook group, Backseat Designers, where we talk with people about adventure game design concepts. We've also got a Google
Kevin
Plus
said
account.
we called them cocks. We certainly did not. We called you idiots.
We called you idiots. Not cocks,
Yeah.
idiots. Major fucking difference.
We would never call you cocks. Sirs, we desperately love you.
Why don't you try to listen to us when we're calling you idiots? We also have a Google Plus page called Backseat Designers, a YouTube channel where you may currently be watching this, also called Backseat Designers. I guess you're noticing a patterns. If you want to listen, if you're old school, if you're an old school kind of idiot and you want to strictly listen to audio of this, go to backseatdesigners.podbean.com. This is also hooked up to Feedburner, iTunes, what have you, so you
Stitcher Radio.
So you can be an idiot that subscribes to other idiots on your idiot devices.
And if you somehow find it endearing that we're calling everyone who's listening to this an idiot, you can be a complete idiot and go to patreon.com/
Yes, the next level of idiocy. Idiots
and
with
give us money for calling you idiots.
So pull your idiot money out of your idiot wallet and throw your idiot money at our idiot Patreon. And in fact, one such arch idiot that we have to idiotically thank on every single idiot episode of this idiot podcast is the head honcho, the big cheese, the great idiot himself, Mr. Stephen Alexander of Infamous Quests.
From Idiot Quests, we salute you, you grand fucking idiot.
Stephen is making some great game. Idiocy aside, Stephen is making some great games for this company, Infamous Quests, and you should Google that stuff and check them out because they're doing a great job of bringing that mid-90s Sierra aesthetic into adventure games of today.
And also ethics in games journalism.
Yeah, ethics in game idiocy.
Yeah, there you go. Boom.
I think that was the whole idiotic spiel for today.
I think that was it too.
What a
Let's
pair
just
of
quit while we're
fucking
ahead.
idiots. Yeah. What a pair of fucking idiots.
Yeah, and especially us,
Yeah.
especially me.
Yeah. So
And
this
you.
was
Why did you say yes? You're supposed to say yes.
Something we got over on the RSG channel that I'm gonna finish this off with in my Christopher Lee voice. Is a testimony from Gareth Millward saying that, and be ready to finish the broadcast after this.
I've got my hand on the clicky button.
According to Gareth Millward, Stephen Alexander is a special category of moron.
See you next week, guys.
No more for today.